A tapestry of glories. For millennia, the Imperial Knights have woven tales of heroism and chivalry across the stars. They have been the shield and the sword, defending humanity and slaying the monsters that would threaten its realm. Though the darkness has closed in around them time and again, always the Knights drive it back, lighting the void with their courage and valor. Millennium 15 to 32. Age of Honor and Vengeance. Foundations of the Night Worlds. Standard template construct technology is created, heralding an era of discovery, innovation, and expansion. Alongside the development of warp travel, STCs enable star-faring ships to voyage enormous distances swiftly, and transform the way that new planets are settled. The first Night Worlds are established by the colonists of the Long March ships. Nightfall. Mankind is pitched into the self-inflicted turmoil of old night. The Night Worlds, insulated by their conservative cultures, endure as scattered motes of light in a sea of darkness. Omnissiah Regnum. After centuries of isolation, Mars receives a visitation from the Emperor. Its peoples believe him to be the Omnissiah, god of all machines. It is knights of House Tyrannus that first bend the knee to this deity from the void, an honor they will not soon forget. The Emperor and the Mechanicum's Fabricator General ratify the Mars Treaty, allying the Red Planet with terror. First of many. The night world of Crisis is rediscovered and brought back into the wider fold of humanity. Many more soon follow. The Great Crusade. As the Emperor's crusading fleets sweep across the galaxy, uniting humanity's scattered worlds one by one, numerous night households are with them. It is a time of restoration and glory, in which many houses form strong ties to the exploratory fleets and Titan legions of the Mechanicum. Others pledge their allegiance and strength to particular Primarchs or Imperial commanders. The Knights prove stalwart allies, the devastation they wreak more than compensating for their sometimes stilted or prickly ways, and it seems as though they will play an instrumental part in establishing the Imperium's dominance over the stars. The Horus Heresy. Warmaster Horus plunges the Imperium into civil war. Corrupted by the dark gods of chaos, he leads fully half the Space Marine legions in open revolt. Some knightly houses join the rebels, either compelled by unbreakable oaths of fealty, or tainted by the touch of chaos. Many more noble houses fight hard for the Imperium, winning one victory after another against the turncoat forces. On both sides, the bloodlines of a number of noble houses are brought to an end during the incredibly fierce fighting, their lives callously expended in the name of victory. The Traitors due. After Horus's defeat at the Siege of Terra, the surviving Royalists hound the traitor forces across the galaxy. Knights are at the forefront of many such campaigns, venting their disgust, hatred, and outrage upon those nobles that betrayed them. A higher number of free blades join the fighting, exacting revenge for houses lost and homeworlds destroyed. Millennium 33 to Millennium 40. Age of Banners Raised. Defense of Vorens. A vast orc war descends upon the night world of Vorens. Its noble houses fight with courage and honor, but are hopelessly outnumbered, and no other Imperial forces can answer their call for aid in time. Though they break the back of the Greenskin Horde, the Knights of Vorens are utterly wiped out. When the loss is recorded on Terra, the bell of lost souls is tolled twice. Long awaited. After over half a century of self-imposed exile as Freeblades, the Agaron brothers return to their homeworld of Silverdawn, where they are welcomed back as heroes. The War of Recovery. 12 knightly houses, including Tyrannus, Raven, and Drax, send lances to join the Adeptus Mechanicus push into the Mortuum chain system. Their efforts are highly successful, with ancient human technologies being wrestled from a clutch of Xenos warlords across the system. Demon Tide. 3 Imperial sectors are overrun by a vast army of the Imperium, referred fearfully to as the Demon Tide. Deploying into the Demon's Path, 5 knightly houses, led by the renowned nobles of Terran, form an adamant bastion to halt the rampage. Using swift loping packs of Armiger Helverins and Warglays, High Queen Desmadara Terran channels the demons through the shattered valleys of Godsmote. As the warp-born creatures spill onto the hollow plain, they are subjected to thunderous bombardment by 24 Knights Castellan. The demons' casualties are phenomenal, yet with no concept of fear, they surge onwards to exact revenge. Over 600 Questores-class knights storm out to meet them, enduring barrages of sorcery, flame, and filth that send towering knight suits toppling in ruin. With Queen Desmadara and her exalted court at the lance point, the knights slam into the still vast demonic horde. They carve a path of annihilation to its heart, the ground shaking beneath their tread, unclean ichor drenching their legs. Though empiric fiends and coruscating warp energies tear down one knight after another, their momentum is unstoppable. At last, with Reaper chainswords howling and thunderstrike gauntlets crackling, the exalted courts of 3 knightly houses engage the masters of the Demon Tide. The battle that follows is so grandiose and cataclysmic that it spawns 100 songs, tales, and tapestries. Several heroic knights are slain by the enormous Great Unclean One, Bolothrax, before the knight valiant known as Master of Iron and Fellbreaker successfully pinion the foul abomination with their thundercoil harpoons. With their quarry unable to move, the knights hacked the mighty demon apart. Bolothrax's banishment spells the end for the Demon Tide, though they wreak much more destruction before they finally fade back into the warp. It is on that day that Bolothrax's unending grudge against House Terran and all its descendants is born. The clouds part. The Imperium makes first contact with the night world of Krag, after the warp storm surrounding it, which had raged for over 20 millennia, finally abates. Unexpected silence. Facing bloody cult uprisings across the mining worlds of the Taurian Belt, Imperial Fist Captain Linator calls upon the Night House of Hawkshroud to lend their aid. To his shock, they fail to answer, one of only 3 times in recorded history that such a thing has happened. The War of 6 Crowns. In a convoluted war of honor, the high monarchs of 6 noble great houses battle one another for rule of the sextant stars. Despite warnings from the Adeptus Terra to cease their costly madness, the knights persist in their war, ignoring all the sanctions that the Imperium dare apply. Slaughter of the Fire Plains. Amidst thundering geysers of geothermal flame, the knights of House Raven confront and crush War Smogbelcher on the fire plains of Voth. Millennium 40 to 41, Age of Braced Gates. Disaster on Alibraxis II. During the Ylandrian Crusade, lances of House Cadmus knights landed on the swamp world of Alibraxis II. The knights march in support of Cadian infantry regiments deployed to that fog-shrouded world, only to be caught in a perfectly executed ambush by the forces of the Thousand Suns. Many nobles are slain, and knight suits lost, as sorceress constructs and demon engines close in from all sides. In the wake of the carnage, House Cadmus vows revenge, and spends the next 3 decades exacting it. War for the Cage. The Diamor system is plunged into anarchy when a combined force of the Black Legion, Crimson Slaughter, and Wordbearers launch a concerted attack. Though their invasion is system-wide, the true objective of the Chaos hosts is the Adeptus Mechanicus dig site on the world of Amethal. A huge army of Imperial knights drawn from House Raven and many of the lesser houses that owe it fealty, fights in the Imperial counter-assault. Over 100 towering war engines facing against heretic Astartes and renegade Titans. Though they suffer heavy casualties, the nobles of House Raven remain undaunted. Empowered by their wrath, they storm the Chaos Lines during the campaign's final battle and are instrumental in bringing down the enemy's Titans and driving the Black Legion from Amathal for good. In the war's wake, House Raven strengthened their bonds of allegiance with both the Tech Priests of Forge World Metallica and the Blood Angel Space Marine chapter. Lone Guardian. Sir Yanil of House Derthos swears an oath to stand guard over the beset mining colonies of the moon of Tandosa. Enthroned within towers of strength, his Knight Castellan, Yanil, sees off repeated attacks by Drukhari pirates. Outraged at the intervention by Yanil and his ironclad behemoth, the leaders of the Drukhari raiding parties send a force of swift gunships and agile fighter craft to eliminate the impediment once and for all. Engaging his airborne tormentors as best he can, Yanil sends a missive to House Derthos for aid, then digs in and vows to hold his ground until he is relieved. It is a week later that Knights of House Derthos reach Tandosa. They find Tower of Strength still standing, ravaged by energy blasts and explosions, its pilot clinging to life by a thread. Around him are scattered the wrecks of the Drukhari vessels, eliminated to the last. An era of judgment. The Genestealer cult of the Withering Worm attempt to infiltrate the noble bloodline of House Beligeris. They quickly learn the magnitude of their mistake when the conditioning of the nobles' thrones aids them in resisting the broodmind, though not without great struggle. In a single night of fire and violence, the cult cells are driven into the open and exterminated like vermin by Beligeris' knights. The Red War. With the aid of the ferocious battle brothers of the Space Wars chapter, the Knights World of Alaric Prime defeats the greenskin hordes of the Red War. The price of victory is steep, however, and a veil of inquisitorial secrecy is drawn over the dire events that mark the war's culmination. Betrayal on Donatus. The knightly house of Adrastapal launch a crusade to save the industrial world of Donatus from heretic forces. 5 noble houses deploy their lances, led by High King Tolwyn of House Draconis. Yet disaster strikes after House Chimeros and Wyvern, their thrones mechanicum tainted through chaos witchery, turn upon their allies in a bloody betrayal. With the High King dead and the knightly forces in disarray, it falls to the young sire Daniel Dan Draconis to rally House Draconis, Pegason, and Minotos. Uniting the planet's scattered Imperial forces, the knights launch a determined fight back, seeking vengeance upon the traitorous nobles and the word-bearers both. The Fall of Fodayam. A tendril of High Fleet Leviathan engulfs the hive world of Fodayam. Due to warp storm activity, the Imperial relief force is lost, leaving Fodayam defenseless. Into the breach steps a company of Freeblades calling themselves the Tarnished Shield, 7 exiled warriors led by Ferrum Magnificat. Through selfless sacrifice and heroic effort, the Freeblades hold the Tyranid swarm at bay long enough for a third of the planet's populace to evacuate successfully. Storm of Shadows. Warp storms rage across the galaxy. Dozens of noble houses dispatch knights to help defend the Cadian Gate, Tyrannus and Raven foremost amongst them, but even their might is not enough to prevent Cadia's fall. House astropaths cry out in horror at the omens of impending doom. Bastion fleets are recalled to their parent knight worlds, racing for safe anchorage before the storm hits. Everywhere the nobles see signs of old knights' return, bracing against the opening of the Great Rift and the appalling carnage that follows. Millennium 41. Age of Honor Enduring. Indomitus. As the Astronomicon flares back into life, It illuminates a riven and beset Imperium. Primarch Guilliman declares his Indomitus crusade, setting out to pierce the darkness of the Imperium Nihilus and drive back the resurgent forces of chaos. House Tyrannus proudly pledges all but a fraction of its fighting strength to the endeavour, waking their oldest knight suits from slumber and deploying their greatest relics of archaeotech to aid in the fight. The Great Cull. On Risa, the number of mutants lurking in the forests explodes exponentially beneath the baleful light of the Siren Storm. As the heretical hordes swell, they spill across the land, destroying agriplexes and settlements at will. Baron Roland declares a cull to end all culls, marching out from Swineford Hall at the head of his entire household. Weeks of slaughter follow, and the lives of many proud knights and courageous sacristans are lost before the mutants are finally driven back. They leave behind mountains of dead so high that the pall from blazing corpse pyres shrouds Risa in smoke. House Cadmus raises new fortifications to overlook the deepest woodlands, even more wary now of the dangers that lurk beneath their boughs. Iron and Fire. The Knights of Tannica march to the aid of the Iron Hands chapter on Medusa. Led by the matriarchal huntress of House Thorn, they battle against the renegade titans of the Legio Abominator and buy time for the Iron Hands clans to rally and fight back. Forging steely chains of allegiance and loyalty, the Iron Hands and Tannican knights drive the heretic invaders back. Rise of the Chainbreaker. Surging from amidst the storms of the Great Rift, Warsmith Ganshaw's Iron Warriors subjugate the night world of Randorin Alpha. Amidst the horrors of the occupation, the night suit known as Canis Rex stirs to life and frees its noble pilot, Sir Hector, from imprisonment. As the last surviving loyal warrior of House Cerberon, Hector swears the Freeblade Oath before setting about rescuing as many enslaved Randorinians as he can. Sir Hector and Canis Rex escape the world alive, and the noble vows to wage an endless war of vengeance against the forces of chaos. War on every front. Cries for help pour into the astropathic relays of Colossi. With stoic determination, the rulers of House Raven dispatch one lance after another, sending their noble warriors out into the void, aboard Mechanicus explorator ships and war barges, many never to return. The House Sacristans cogitate that, at the current rate of deployment, Raven will have fully emptied the Vault Transcendent within one anno cycle. Xenostorm. House Morton recalls their questing lances as word reaches them of a vast orc war on a collision course with their homeworld of Kimdaria. Rather than wait for War Ragrat to fall upon them, the Knights of Mortan elect to hunt the greenskin horde as they would a single monstrous beast. So begins a bloody war across 3 systems, with lances of Mortan knights bolstering planetary garrisons and attempting to bait, slow and divide the orcs until they can be wiped out once and for all. Demonic Vengeance. Amidst the swirling fury of the Damocles Gulf, High King Tybalt leads the Knights of House Terrin in their latest push against the Tau invaders. They strike at the recently reclaimed Tau colony world of Shanset, formerly an Imperial-held world known as Gossamer. Initially, the Terran offensive progresses well. The Knights are supported by a force of Raven Guard Space Marines, who scout ahead of their advance and repeatedly negate the Xenos enemy's rapid maneuver tactics. The battle takes an unexpected turn, however, as the skies curdle into matted filth and black rain falls, rotting all that it touches. From the sucking morass rise the demons of Nurgle, led by the bloated abomination that is Bolothrax, the great unclean one. In the vicious conflict that follows, House Terran sustains terrible losses, while the vengeful Bolothrax wounds High King Tybalt sorely and fells the knights of 3 of his closest blood relatives. It is only when the Raven Guard lured their Tau forces into contact with the demonic hosts that Tybalt's exalted court are able to spearhead a breakout. The mauled Imperial forces stage a fighting retreat to their extraction point, battling droning plague creatures all the way. They leave Shanset to the frustrated demons, who waste no time in making the Tau suffer. The Malefica Crusade. The fanatically pious House Dale empty the keeps of their homeworld, Glorifica, to launch a witch-hunting crusade across the Segmentum Pacificus. The Saviour's Hunt. Amidst the darkness of the Imperium Nihilus, the factory world of Dracatoria is struck by reality disjunction. Tides of horrifying shadow spawn crawl from the nether realm of Alindrach and infest every city on the globe. Perpetual night falls, and murderous mandrakes and wraith creatures hunt the terrified populace through the dark, led by the fiendish Karandrach, the Decapitator. Dracatoria's astropaths scream their minds bloody as they cry out for aid. Though it costs them their eyes, their pleas do not go unanswered. The bastion ships of House Griffin arrive in orbit. Their heavy landers surge down through the shadow-choked atmosphere, disgorging hunting lances by the dozen into Dracatoria's nightmarish urban sprawl. The campaign that follows is a vicious affair. Griffith armatures sweep through the industrial ruins, banishing the shadows with their hull lumen and using their weapons to flush out packs of mandrakes into the guns of the larger knights. Hissing nightmares emerge impossibly within the cockpits of night suits, knifing screaming nobles to death in frenzies of violence. Brave sacristans pilot their landers into the darkest zones, lighting vast brazier circles to drive back the shadows and the terrors that lurk within them. The tide finally turns when a trio of Dominus-class Griffith knights manage to forge a path to the shattered webway spar that began the madness, and subjected to sustained bombardment. Sensing the link to their dark dimension closing, those shadow creatures still able to retreat do so, returning to Alindrach. Those that cannot sink into the darkest depths they can find, fleeing the return of dawn on Dracatoria. House Griffith claim victory over the battered ruins of the industrial cities, though the planet's populace will never sleep soundly again. Against the storm. Hastoria, too, faces a demonic apocalypse as the coils of warp storm Baphomet engulf it. Yet the planet's Nova Marines and Cadian defenders receive aid unlooked for when the free blade known as the Stormwalker arrives. Supported by the Night Castellan's massive guns, protected by its crackling shields, the Imperial forces stage a determined stand that at least halts the demons before the shrine of St. Hastus. A time for vengeance. Far from being dismayed at the sudden ascendancy of chaos, House Crost relishes this chance to take revenge upon their hated foes. No less than 6 crusades of vengeance are launched from Crisis, spreading through the void towards the forge worlds of Voss, Phaeton, Urdesh, Styges, Armenia Majoris, and distant Graea. As they link up with Adeptus Mechanicus forces, Crost's bloodthirsty crusaders gather pace, driving the traitors before them. Death's long ode. Already stretched dangerously thin, House Hawkshroud find themselves in deadly peril as the orcs of Warg Zagsmasher descend upon their homeworld of Crastalan. Cries for help are sent, Death's long ode called in at last from many allies that Hawkswood have so selflessly aided over the millennia. Most fall upon deaf ears, but on Baal, Valhalla and Dragon's End, relief forces begin to muster, while in the Empyrean, the Primaris Marines of the Valiant Blades turn their ship's helm towards Crastalan. Whether their reinforcements will arrive before the homeworld of House Hawkswood is overrun remains to be seen. Here be dragons. The Questor Mechanicus world of Altevor is ravaged by fire-breathing packs of helldrakes that swoop through its polluted atmosphere and wreak havoc amongst its manufactorums. Princeps Alderace orders the attacks ended, and her sacristans use their macro-cogitators to determine that the Helldrakes are striking from the mountaintop forge temple of Gamma Peak. Princess Adelaide mobilizes her exalted court and the vast majority of her world's knights and leads a determined attack upon the slopes of the mountain. The knights discover hundreds of mechanical dragons roosting amidst the ruin-forged temple, and for days the smog clouds that wreathe the mountain are lit by flame and gunfire. When finally the Princeps and her much-reduced knightly lances march down the mountainside, the Helldrakes are no more. The War of Death's Welcome. A splinter fleet of High Fleet Hydra plows down upon the night world of Death's Welcome. Morbid nihilists who worship the Emperor as the harbinger of war and ending, the House of Death's Welcome greet the Tyranid invasion not with terror, but somber rituals of celebration. Marching out in night suits of sable and bone, singing dirges from beneath their chain-mail veils, the Knights of House Drudge, Fervens and Scythe prepare to meet their long-foretold end. The war is spectacularly violent, with tidal waves of Tyranid beasts crashing against the Knights' lines. The nobles' guns reap thousands of Xenos by the minute, only for the next wave to scramble atop the bodies of the fallen and hurl themselves at the Knights in return. Rippers slither in rivers up the legs of Knight suits to gnaw through hydraulic cables and clog workings with their corpses. Hormagaunts and Termagants erode the Knight's armor plating through sheer weight of bioshot and claw, and then tear and stab at vital systems. All across the battlefield, Knights are lost, falling into an endless writhing sea of Xenos creatures. Yet still the Knights of Death's Welcome fight on, their hymnals growing ever louder and more fervent as the end approaches. Against all expectation, the surviving nobles find the Tyranid tide ebbing, then drying up altogether. Hydra's bioships flee orbit, the reserves of biomass dangerously spent. Just 18 nobles remain, from a starting force of over 400. Yet through their survival, Death's Welcome also endures. A claim denied. Eldorei raiders from craftworld Elitok launch a sudden shocking assault upon Voltores, the homeworld of House Terran. The cause of this aggression is unclear, but the response is swift. Alongside the famous Chainbreaker, the Knights of House Terran fight to drive the Xenos from their world. Casualties are high on both sides, but it is the will of the Eldorei that breaks first. For the Omnissiah. Though they are of Imperial alignment, the knightly House of Avarice launch a stinging assault across the Vida sector to relieve the heretical siege of Forge World Triplex Fal. The Ancients awaken. What begins as an isolated conflict between the Adeptus Mechanicus and the Necrons on the quarry world of Amontep II becomes a galaxy-wide war. Across the planets of both the Adeptus Mechanicus and the Knights, Necron presence is suddenly and startlingly revealed. The mountains of Aurus IV rumble with tectonic tremors as Necron tombs awaken beneath the surface of House Vulca's fiefdoms. On Voltores, the recently healed High King Tybalt recalls swathes of his House Knights from the Eastern Fringe, jeopardizing their chances of winning an ongoing war with the Tau Empire to counter an emergent Necron threat upon Terran's homeworld. Dozens of Forge worlds issue calls for reinforcements from their satellite night worlds as Necron tombs stir to life beneath their foundations. Yet the noble houses are equally beset. Many believe that the Necron's awakening has accelerated as a response to the coming of the Great Rift. But whatever the truth of the matter, well over half of the Imperium's Forge and Night worlds are now besieged by the ancient race. Renegades of Darovar. Sir Drantar of House Taranis is sent to hunt down, once and for all, the lunatic knight known as Litany of Destruction. Drantar and his knight, Red Might, follow the trail of auto-infectious madness that spreads in the Litany's wake, their hunt taking them to the Nachmund Gauntlet and the contested world of Darovar. The world is home to the traitorous knights of House Mandracore, And it is there, amidst constant night wars, the red might and the litany of destruction clash at last.